as far back as I can remember, it's been the car that gets talked about because it made a new look.
My idea of customizing is cleaning the car off, and the Hirohata car was the first one that sort of went the other direction. It set the trend for custom cars.
The other cars became mild customs alongside this radical custom.
The low stance and the profile, you could tell right away it wasn't something you got from the dealer. It's the iconic Chop Merc, and the Chop Merc is the iconic custom car.
It was the top, it was the best.
The car made such an impact, it broke new ground. Right now today, they can customize 51 Mercurys over and over again, and nothing's going to top that car. It's the one.
In the classic car era, wealthy people would buy a chassis and then they would have a coach builder build their body to suit them. Customizing is coach-built cars for the common man. In other words, instead of Duesenbergs, Packards, and Cadillacs, they used Fords and Mercurys. In those days, you got a car, period. There wasn't a huge host of options, so if you were going to personalize it and make it your own, you had to do it yourself or have it done.
The customizers were starting with a fairly cheap car that they could afford and putting these more expensive parts on it to make it look like a much more expensive car. A lot of these guys, especially in the 50s, they couldn't afford two cars, so they'd drive these things on the street.
You would just kind of like fall back and stare at the thing. And it would make this impression, you know, that you couldn't forget. You'd have to tell everybody about what you saw.
It's definitely a purely American art form, and it was just a chance to express yourself. Those things, as you look back on them, they get labeled later on, but at the time you're doing it, you're just doing it.
It's the healthiest thing you can do is to get your personality out there in your car and let people see how you're thinking. You know, this is who I am right here. It comes from the heart, you know.
You could turn what was already built into more of an art piece by the shine, the finish. The better the detail, the better the job, the more people noticed it.
You could go to a junkyard in those days, go to any car you want, take whatever parts you wanted and pay it, go home, and figure out how to get it into your car.
Custom cars didn't develop until pretty much after the war, when these early hot rodders had some war pay. They were starting meaningful jobs.
A lot of the soldiers were into racing, and that's how a lot of these cars came about.
There was a different kind of group of guys who gravitated to the customs. Customs cost a lot more to build than a hot rod. You know, you can build a hot rod with wrenches and a welder, but you got to know in a custom car metal shaping and leading and all that kind of stuff, let alone the custom upholstery.
The drive-in was usually the place where you went and showed your car off. The guys that were looking for girls went in the customs. The guys that were looking for racing went in the hot rods.
In a custom car, you could pick up the nice chicks that didn't want to go get their hair blown in a roadster.
The 50s, man, you just thought everything was going to be great, you know. You had a lot of fun with your car. There wasn't so many people. You could get out on the streets and you drive around, listen to the music, you know, and the sound would come on the radio. And, you know, it might want to go faster, make you want to go slow. They had car clubs, and if they had a car show, you just had to be there. You'd see these roadsters and race cars and custom cars and the colors, and it's just neat. It was a good time.
Things that are essential in a custom car, lowering definitely makes the car look sleeker, makes it have a better appearance. In show categories, radical means chopped, channeled, or sectioned. Chop is you take a section out of the roof and lower it back down. Channel is lowering the whole car over the frame, and section is taking a strip of metal all the way around the side of the body to lower the profile. Chop Mercs became the iconic custom car. The lines of the 49 to 51 Mercury just lent themselves to that procedure and gave a more pleasing profile than they had stock.
Everybody knew that Barris's shop was the best. Anything that came out of that shop was really, really something really neat to have.
My brother and I coming here to LA, in the decade where we really had to pioneer everything and get it started was from 1940 to 1950. There was nobody doing it. That means chopping the tops, sectioning the body over channel, full fadeaways, pancake hoods, all these little things that had to start somewhere from somebody that wanted to do it, and that was myself. We had a lot of fun doing it.
George was full of ideas. He was a great promoter. His brother Sam was a craftsman behind the scenes. He's the one that did the tough metal work. Now, make no mistake, George could do lead work, he could do welding and everything else. But Sam did the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Sam and George were pretty dirt floor scraping the barrel when they started. It took them a while to build up this clientele to have customers like Hirohata. But after the war, guys were making money, and so George was ready to reel in those customers.
Barris' shop wasn't that far from our house. At that time, we'd stop and try to look in there, and there was always something customized in there. Just crazy stuff. Sam would see you and he'd chase you, yell at you, and he'd always wear these goggles up here, and we'd all take off. And then you'd go around the alley on the other side and look in on that side.
There was a good crew then. Frank Sanzoni was a Linwood policeman who worked there at night and on weekends. Junior Conway had worked at Barris's since about 1955.
At 16 years old, I bought this 50 Ford, and I bought a pair of 51 Mercury skirts, and they were too tall. So I cut the top of the skirts off, hemmed the edge over, did all the setup work, and then my friend took me down to Barris's, and Sam welded it for me, charged me $2. He wanted to know who did this work, and I said, I did it. And he said, how'd you do it? And I said, it was a hacksaw and a pair of pliers. He kind of laughed at that, And they said, you want a job working after school? I said, sure. So that skirt laid the pattern for my life.
His name's Herschel Conway, but George couldn't remember people's names, let alone Herschel. He was the youngest one in the shop, so he became junior, and he's junior to this day. He's been called the best car painter in the world and has done everything from Pebble Beach Duesenbergs down to Chop Mercs.
George would come up with this idea and that idea, and halfway into that idea, if it wasn't working well, they changed it. You just went along with it because he was the head guy. He was the man.
He wanted his customs to be as modern as the new cars, but better. The customizers weren't following Detroit. Detroit was following the customizers. He built these cars. The first thing they did is they went to the car show to try to win a trophy when it was all fresh and clean. You talk about competitive. Barris even made his own trophies and lined them up in front of his cars.
If you saw the facilities they had, the tools they had, you would say, how did they do this? And yet these pieces came out just as well if you had a precision machine building it. The handwork was there, the thought was there, and the talent was there. And it was just a matter of putting it all together.